Hey there, beloved, and welcome to this video. We are in the middle of our series. I don't even know if I should call it a mini-series, but our series called Love, the Greatest Force in the Universe. So let's continue with the slide. It looks like, I'm just checking my volume here, that something has changed. But I think you will not even hear it, so I'm going to leave it at that. This slide. This was the last one of last time, and we went through this, of course, already. So we will continue with the same law, the law of leverage. Because, and this is something I asked, I also went through in the past, but this is a little bit more extended. So what would you choose? On the one hand, safety and security, SS, or freedom and risk, FR. So these two are always together, and these two as well in that sense. So let's go through it, right? Suppose that I choose SS. What is the long-term consequence of that? My world will gradually get smaller and smaller. You can count on that. And after all, the driver of this choice is fear. And it gets worse and worse. It doesn't stop at a certain point. It gets worse and worse. It develops downwards. And this speaks of immaturity, and this is essential and wise to apply that to the little ones, the little children. 1, 2, 3 years old, maybe 4 as well. It's, of course, to a certain extent. The thing is that if you choose safety and security, and you should choose that for little children because they need to feel safe and secure. That's what they need very much. So as they grow up, so to speak, they will need it less and less because they will form their own viewpoints and make their own images of the world. So immaturity, this is a choice of immaturity. Again, why? Because the driver is fear. And if you let me call it, I'm going to give you an example here. Fear of blemish. Do you know that? I have dealt with a person who had that. That was terrible, really terrible. And it grows constantly negatively. So it grows downwards. And if nothing is done about it, of course. This speaks of immaturity. After all, it is essential for babies and small children, of course. But as a person grows up, then FR comes into play more and more in a normal situation. Let's read about FR. Suppose I choose FR. What is the long-term consequence of that? Before I continue, please bear with me. Why do I use long-term consequence as the measuring stick here? Because our life should be led always long-term. Not only our life, everything. So leading something means always going for the long-term results. So please bear in mind, governing something is always about the benefits, the optimal benefits in the long term, never short term. At the contrary, in the short term, you need to take the pain of discipline, as you know. So let's continue. What is the long-term consequence of a choice for FR, for freedom and risk? My world, that's the opposite, of course. It gets bigger and bigger. After all, the sky will become the limit in that sense. With, of course, realistic risk calculation, there is almost always success afterwards, and especially in the long run. Always. So, this is the mature choice. It speaks of maturity. So, you are going out into the world and you are taking risk because that is a part of life. We are relative beings. We know as believers that God directs everything. We know that. That's the absolute viewpoint. But we are relative beings and we lead our life. And when it rains, then we complain, even if we know that God sends the rains, as an example, etc., etc. So we don't know what's around the corner. Only God knows. So this is the mature choice. And let me read a piece of my notes here. So as an example, I will use entrepreneurship. It is practically always successful. If not, at a certain point in time, then you learn from it. And then, afterwards, you become successful. The richest people in the world are always entrepreneurs. Never someone who works for a boss. Ever, never, ever. After all, it corresponds to loving oneself because it is maturity. It speaks of maturity. You are your own boss, relatively speaking. So you are practicing your passion. That is entrepreneurship. You are doing what you always wanted to do, and that starts with self-knowledge, of course, and self-love, self-acceptance. So be aware of that. So this is just an example in terms of the law of leverage, how you can approach all these, developments in life. So you can approach it like this. So you have safety, security only for the immature situations and for little children, of course. And you have freedom that always goes with risk, calculated risk, and that is the mature one. Okay, so let's go to another well-known schedule. I'm going to go through it again. It is so essential, these principles, in order to understand how unconditional love truly works, how it works. This one, the confrontation matrix. So let's suppose you are in a religion and you come into contact with the truth, right? So the question is, what do you do? If you decide to stay in a religion and not adopt the truth, as an example, it will happen very often that you decide to stay in a religion because you think of in the short term. You think of the short-term benefits, but they last only a short time. But that is the first tendency of humans, to look on the short term. That is the point. So in the short term, it is true, you will retain your reputation. Or if you are a leader in church, you will retain your reputation. You will retain your friends. Income. Power. Yes, you will retain all of them. But that's only the short term. Let's say the short term is 100 years. You live 100 years. It's shorter, of course, if you just take your leadership into account. But let's say 100 years. That's nothing compared to the more than 20,000 years of Aeonian bliss. Aeonian, that is wrongly translated with eternal. It's Aeonian. And those are the coming eons of 1,000 years, and after that of 20,000 years. At least. That's what I think. At least. That is the eon of the new heavens and the new earth. So you will lose out on that. So if you did good works, okay, then you will lose out on the fourth eon, the next eon, and then you will be resurrected to stand before the great white throne to be judged. You know that judgment is always corrective, right? Always. So you will stand before the throne and you will be judged according to your works. And if your works as a church leader were good, okay, and you helped a lot of people, etc., etc., you counseled a lot of people, great, then you will be transferred to the new earth. If not, if your works were evil and bad and manipulation, etc., etc., then you will probably, your name will not be found written in the book of life, and you will put in the lake of fire, being dead for a second time. You will be dead for a second time in the lake of fire. And you will miss out on the fifth glorious, most glorious eon. But afterwards, you will be, I have to say it, you will be resurrected again from the lake of fire, from the second death, and you will acknowledge Jesus as Lord to the glory of God the Father. Your knee will bow as well, and you will acclaim from the inside out that Jesus is Lord. Everyone will do that. Also Satan. Yes, you heard me. Also Satan. So again, most people, regrettably, I'm talking relatively here, choose to stay in religion, especially in the leadership. They choose to stay in religion because of these benefits. But they forget on the long term that they lose Aeonian life, and the last judgment before the great white throne awaits you. So if you choose truth, and now I'm talking about my own experience because I was in religion, I came into contact with the truth, and I chose truth because I became very curious, and it was like I was onto something, So I went to pursue it. I wanted to know more and more and more. I was insatiable. But I didn't even realize, of course, these things. But it's God who led me, of course. It's God who kindled that curiosity, of course. So the long-term benefits for choosing truth, they last a very long time, and they are glorious beyond imagination. So, time is flying again. My goodness. Let's continue. So, let's look at again some passages I started with in this series. Let's look again at those. First of all, Lamentations 3, verse 32-33. Indeed, though God afflicts, yet he has compassion according to the abundance of his benignities. For he doesn't humiliate from his heart, or so afflict the sons of man. He doesn't like it, but it is the pain of discipline. Do you see it now? The principle behind it. God is taking the pain of discipline to afflict humans for their own good in the long term. He humiliates in the short term, and it hurts him to do that to his loved creatures. But he has to do it, to take the pain of discipline, to have the optimal benefit for his creation, his beloved creation, in the long term, ultimately. And this one is the huge one, remember? Let's read it, Acts 2:23-24. This one, that is Jesus, given up, how? in the specific counsel and foreknowledge of God. You, gibbeting by the hand of the lawless, assassinate, said Peter to the Israelites, and God raised him from the dead. He vivified him. So, here, this was, of course, God's greatest pain of discipline. To see his only begotten Son suffer like that. Again, like I said earlier, God suffered much more than his Son, because his awareness, his consciousness is much larger than his Son's. Can you see that now? God suffered more, and he did it. He took that suffering for himself, because that was the only thing to do in order to have an end result in the long term of unbelievable glory, and not in the least for himself. When he has that intimate, loving, mutual relationship with his creation, because that is his ultimate goal. So let's do one more slide. So we will start, of course, going through 1 Corinthians 13, the love chapter, and we will start with 4 through 7. Let's read it first. These are the application of this is the application of the principles to love. Love is patient, is kind. Love is not jealous. Love is not bragging, is not puffed up. Love is not indecent, is not self-seeking, is not incensed. It's not taking account of evil. Is not rejoicing in injustice, yet is rejoicing together with the truth. Very interesting. Love is foregoing all, is believing all, is expecting all, and is enduring all. This is maturity for you. Wow. So let's go through it, because I'm not finished. I'm not going to go through patient and kind, because not only do we know exactly what it means, but it's also two words that will be coming in this series later. They will appear again, so that's why. But let's start with not jealous. So how can you say that differently? Love is not jealous. I would say love is satisfied. How about that one? Love is satisfied. Right? And satisfied with what you have, of course. And that talks about inner peace as well. Right? So, the next one. Love is not bragging. Love is modest. How about that? Love is modest. It is realistic. It sees itself as realistic, according to the truth. Love is not puffed up. How about love is humble? Right? Love is humble. Next one. Love is not indecent. That's easy. It is decent. Love is decent. Decent comes from the word figure. It's about taking the other, how do you say that? Taking the other into account. And that's also, of course, about not self-seeking. Because if you say love is not self-seeking, you could say love is it assumes the interests of others, and if it must, it sacrifices something of himself. That is love. It's not self-seeking. It rather sacrifices itself in that sense to help another, to build up another. Love is not incensed, meaning love is, that's a difficult one. Love is at peace with itself. You could say that. It's not taking account of evil. That is also quite clear. This one I like. Is not rejoicing in injustice, yet is rejoicing together with the truth. The truth. This is interesting. Why? Because it puts injustice as the opposite of truth. In that sense. Interesting, right? They are in one sentence together. Injustice is a lie in reality. It's not truth. You could also say truth and justice are working on the same area. They are always in each other's neighborhoods. So this one, love is foregoing all. She renounces all revenge. Is believing all what? All what God says in His written word. That is what love is believing all the time. Is expecting all what God promises that He would do, and is enduring all because of the expectation. Remember that expectation strengthens endurance. Right? So this is how it works. I hope it is clear up till now. The next video we will continue with the love chapter. So thank you very much for watching, and see you then.